Production funding of Folks is made possible in part by membership contributions to Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Hello and welcome to Folks. Tonight we are coming to you from Lafayette, where we begin a 4-week mini-documentary series on Louisiana's Black history. February is Black History Month, and over the next 4 weeks we will take a look at Louisiana's black struggles, accomplishments, and their results. We've come to Lafayette Parish to take a look at one battle in one of Black America's oldest and dearest fights for equal justice, education. To understand what is happening in public education in this growing community of 85,000 and how it relates to its 25% black population, we must go back to 1896 and the beginnings of black segregated schools.
Public education in Lafayette Parish began around 1896 upon the Supreme Court decision of Plessy versus Ferguson in what was known as a separate but equal doctrine. So they formulated a group of 5 or 6 men, and they got what is known as the Lafayette Parish Education Association. They received a charter which gave them power to assist in the education of children. They bought land, and then after buying the land, they proposed and sent the land, turned the land over for use for Negro education. In 1896, the services of one man known as Paul Breaux was secured to open a school for colored children. And that school was located at Simcoe, West Simcoe, and South Washington Street, 400 block. Paul Breaux came in, then later on he had 2 other women with him, from what I understand, and they taught school there, completely. It was an elementary school from 1896 to about 1926. In 1926, one W.D. Smith was hired to come over and assist Mr. Breaux. Mr. Smith took over his principalship upon the death of Paul Breaux in 1926. At the same time, he started the high school, what is known as a high school in our community, public high school, adding 1 grade at a time per year.
If there's one thing that most of the Lafayette black adults have in common, it's their schooling. For more than 70 years, all the blacks in the parish who wanted a public education attended one of the 11 colored training schools.
Oh, yes, I love to go to school. I wanted to go to school. We went far as we could. If you can't go no further, you understand? When you went to 7th grade or 8th grade, that's all they would let you go. Walk to school, honey. The place they call Coonville is the country right there. Do you know that was 5 miles from that place to Paul Breaux? Then it got a little closer. We had to walk from Coonville to Paul Breaux, and that was in Fightingville. They called the place Fightingville. And we had 1 pair of shoes. 1 pair of shoes. We had to take a towel or rag with us. When we got close by school, a block from school, we'd sit and wipe our feet and put that pair of shoes on.
But you had one-room schools. A teacher taught you everything. She was a lunchroom supervisor as well. She did everything in that particular class. There was no limit to number of students in the classroom. The materials were hard to get. You had to scrounge for whatever you wanted. That's prior to 54.
There was 160 of us with 2 teachers.
How can you teach that many children in different grades too, right?
Well, the major thing is something like the open classroom technique that is used now, or what we call the Winnetka plan or the Colorado plan.
To say the least, black schools in the beginning were humble, but there was an enthusiasm and determination in the hearts of the teachers and students that seemed to overshadow the facilities and books that were lacking.
In some cases, even books mostly in the Negro schools was provided by what is known as a hand-me-down. New books was not even provided for until later on in the years when the State Department and other department came about with allocation for students. Well, facilities for Negro schools, as far as I know, in the 1926 bond issue, when bond issues were floated in these communities, the bond issues was used most providingly for white education. That is, and what was left was given to the Negro for thing. Now, if you look at schools in the vicinity of Lafayette, most of your schools for white were brick. Those for Negroes were wood.
We did not get the same salary as other people prior to 54. I mean, personal now, I started working for $50 a month. And that were white teachers in the same position I was in, making $100 a month during that particular. Of course, that's only 40. We did not get the new books. I never did learn out of a new book, nor did I teach out of a new book. We got the leftovers from they would carry those to and we had to go there and get those books ourselves.
The dual education system for black and white schools was commonplace in not only Lafayette, but much of the South as well. It was accepted that black and white didn't mix. If black educators and parents didn't agree with the status quo, the white community seemed not to notice.
I would be amiss if I didn't mention that the man who was responsible for everything that I had is W.D. Smith, who was our first principal. And regardless of what happened, he constantly insisted that, he said, covers, you didn't learn a thing from the covers of a book, it was between the covers you learned.
What blacks taught in their schools also seemed to go unnoticed by the majority community.
Our students were utmost in our aim to improve the conditions because we felt if we would train students to be interested in more than just books, it would be better for them to become active citizens. So we are really concerned with them being prepared for life. Yes, our curriculum, we had English, history, science, and at one time my husband, maybe I shouldn't say this, but he put Negro history in the school, but he had to take it out.
Why?
Because they didn't want it in there. So he had to take it out. I think we taught Negro history probably once or twice, one or two sessions, but we were teaching it. And we taught them we tried to teach them to realize that they would not all stay in Lafayette. They would have to think in terms of preparing themselves for living in other places and realizing that when they would go to these other places, they would have to be capable of knowing how to meet the people, how to be understanding of the difference in social life and so forth like that.
For more than 50 years, the inequalities of the separate school system went unabated. The area now which runs along the Evangeline Thruway and which now houses the La Rosen School was the second site of the Paul Breaux School. From 1926 until 1953, the Paul Breaux School sat on this ground. It wasn't like it is now. In fact, it was a pretty rural area. A big ditch ran along the school, and parents and teachers felt that the area was unsafe for their children. In 1953, the voters of Lafayette Parish passed a school bond which called for the construction of several new schools. The Paul Breaux School was to be rebuilt, but the controversy rose in the black community over those plans for construction. According to the plans, the white schools which were to be built at the time were to be built in brick, and the black school, Paul Breaux, was to be built in wood.
A protest took place in the winter and early spring of that year.
We just called a strike, and I was the president of Progressive League, and they came to see me would I face the gun, because they couldn't jeopardize their job. The teachers couldn't jeopardize their job.
Weren't they going to build a new school?
Yeah, they promised to build, but they didn't build, so we called a strike. So I stood there with the children, you know, and trying to keep them from they didn't go into school. They didn't, but the other officers, police trying to scare them, they better go into school. You better go to school, because if you don't go, we're going to put you in jail. So they brought us to court, summoned me to court. And they said, why I want to go and face, why I want to bring all this disturbance. They had never had that before. I said, they're my children, and we're afraid. I'm afraid of them they can go and be playing there and be playing and get drowned or anything. And I saying the school is not equipped. They don't have the right facilities up in the school. So they keep them question. So they want to know how many children did I have. And then before that they say, well, now you know what happened. Let's see, I didn't answer. So you know you're the cause of 585 students out of school today? Say, well, I didn't know. I say, I didn't know. So he says, well, yes, you have. So another lawyer says, well, how many children do you have going to school? I said, 585. Then a big white man jumped up in the courthouse. She sure have a good grinder. So I looked back at him and I said, you didn't know I grind yours too? So that broke up the meeting.
The results of that particular thing, the school was redesigned and went into a brick and deal. Plus the fact that, of course, they had to sacrifice something like a gymnasium, which they wanted, and in order to have the same money for which probably was locked in for the construction of the particular school.
The black student strike for the third Paul Breaux School was the beginning of a series of events that eventually led to desegregation.
A study group had been formed on the campus of the University of Southwestern, and the study group was concerned with social justice. When the decision of the 1954 court decision was rendered in destroying separate but equal doctrine, you had people somewhat involved, but very reluctantly, very slowly. But the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People had legal defense funds and legal defense and organizations working.
So these kind of like civil rights groups were a real threat to some people in higher up positions.
Yes. You see, my philosophy is if a man beats you thinking, he's your boss, not his color, his race, or his creed. You just have to beat you thinking, and he becomes your boss. Now, there's some people who were thinking. There were organizations that we started to work with, such as Catholic War Veterans, that brought in some representation from time to time and some inspiration, too.
By this time, the black population in Lafayette had grown large enough to merit having a building exclusively for upper grade students. In 1959, Paul Breaux High School was built next to the Paul Breaux Elementary School on South Orange Street in the heart of the black community. But the push for desegregation was on. Why did it take so long for a court suit to come into play?
Each of those cases were economic cases, and it cost about $10,000 per case. So in order for you to get that kind of money, not just locally, but through the national organization, you had to have 2 or 3 different organizations help sponsor it. And the 2 major sponsoring agencies in the state of Louisiana was the Louisiana Education Association, a black professional organization for teachers and principals and so forth, and supervisors and the like, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. They came up with the money after the idea had been pushed over and where the guinea pig areas would be. And I think Lafayette was selected as one of the guinea pig areas. There were some 15 or 16 discrepancies which they observed. Number one would be not just facilities, but then other activities that the schools were not included in. A little before desegregation of school came by, we were looking for equalizing teachers' salary. I think I gave you on the other one, prior to the equalization of teachers' salaries, Negro teachers were given 1/2 of the amount that was paid to white teachers. Then prior to desegregation also, Negro children had to walk to go to school in the mud, in the rain, and everything else. Well, Negro children were riding as far as 18 miles to come to a central Negro high school, when there were probably 2 let's take the rich community. In the rich community, you would be passing GD's High, you'd probably pass Lafayette Senior High, and maybe some other high before you got to Paul Breaux. So the farmers out there felt, well, our children are working in the field. We're not getting the use out of our children because they're on the bus too long. They're leaving home at 6 o'clock in the morning. They'll come back in the evening after 5 almost, you know.
A number of us were thinking in terms of equal educational opportunities. All of us are familiar with the separate but equal doctrine. Lafayette was like most other places in the South. Schools were separate but unequal. At that time, black schools were considered good black schools. They were not considered good schools per se. And I think most people at that time were interested in good schools for their children.
The next step was to find someone who would lend their name to a law battle that would open the doors of the all-white schools to black children. In 1965, the NAACP asked Walter Trahan if they could use his daughter's name as plaintiff.
We go I used to go to a meeting, and we was fighting that for our rights. I never had a school day in my life. I wanted my kids to have some school. So that's the reason I went. They asked who was going to witness. I raised my hand. And another guy raised his hand, but they didn't question him. Sitting there, Marvel. They questioned just me. I'm the honest one.
Was your daughter very happy about this? Did she want to be used as a guinea pig?
She was willing.
She didn't go to a white school, did she?
Well, I don't remember.
That was in high school days.
Yeah.
And she didn't, I don't think.
Well...
Because she was in age with my daughters, and they didn't go to...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My daughters went to white school when they went to college.
That's one reason I done that. I didn't get a chance to get 1 day of school. So I wanted my kids to get some.
That was the main reason you did it?
You're right. But my poor dad, they used to get 4 or 5 together and hire somebody that wasn't the 3rd, 4th grade to teach her. And I couldn't learn nothing with them. They didn't know that much. Some of my first cousins came from me and teach us. We were living on the Ivory Hour. So she didn't have too much school. She had never been to college. She teach her what she knew.
Well, he managed to learn to sign his name. He can sign his name.
You've done pretty good if you put 4 children through college, or at least got them education.
No, but one that went to college. The rest of them didn't go.
At one time, they called my husband to Southwestern to ask him to explain to them why they wanted integration. For what reason? The first question they asked him was, it for a social reason? And he told them definitely not. It was not a social reason. It was to make it possible for those students to prepare themselves for a job in any field they desire, not the ones that were just limited to Paul Breaux, but to give them a wider scope from which to select a means of making a living.
The civil rights groups, with Alfreda Trahan's name as their front, took their case to court. With the United States government keeping an eye on the turn of events, the battle for equal education was won. The next step was to implement a desegregation plan. The courts left the decision to the school board as to how it was going to devise a way to integrate the schools. Teachers are told to desegregate first, and 2 years after the court suit was filed, black students started to integrate all white schools. In fact, in a newspaper article dated September 7, 1967, the headlines read, "All white status is ended for schools in Lafayette." The newspaper article went on to say more than 600 Negro students were enrolled Tuesday in formerly all-white schools, causing a drop in former all-Negro school enrollment and an increase in the formerly all-white school tally. Unfortunately for Paul Breaux High School, this was the beginning of the end.
At one time, Paul Breaux
housed all high school black students, parish-wide. Then they began with the desegregation suit, which if you lived outside of the city limits, then you went to the school in that particular area, which who could argue with that from a common sense basis. Then they came into the city, and this was purely now for racial purposes to now start moving blacks and whites.
The first year before Paul Breaux closed was what you call a year that the student could select the school he wished to go to. He didn't have to come to Paul Breaux just because he was a Negro. If he wanted to go to the white schools, he could. Now that preceded, and the next year they integrated. Integrated Paul Breaux to go to the white schools, so forth. Now that year, some of them did not come back to Paul Breaux because they thought it was better in the white schools. But after being there, some tried and wanted to come back to Paul Breaux that year.
The educational advantage you had in going to, say, to a white school at the time, than coming to Paul Breaux High School. We required our kids to have the whatever was required by the state, plus additional things. We required 4 Englishes. We had this at this high school. These kids went to the other schools, and they were completely cut out of that. They wanted you to be football players and basketball players, but they were not in the debating club. They weren't in the dramatics club. They had to audition for the chorus, had to audition for the band.
I think there is. I think there is a little difference because before they had no contact with the white society or their way of living until they were integrated. See, because they were directly concerned in black schools. We had Holy Rosary, that was a Catholic high school, you see, and they were all blacks, and Paul Breaux High, and they were all black. So it seemed if there was a little problem there in being able to adjust themselves to the integration. The student feels that he still isn't wanted, or he's still not a first-class citizen, let me say it that way. That they feel that they are put in a manner, that they're treated in a manner that you're still inferior to the whites.
One plus as far as integration was concerned, you did get better school facilities. And you had stricter supervision of schools, and the curriculums were updated.
The second phase of the Lafayette desegregation plan was the most critical. It began a slow shutdown of the black segregated schools. After all, everyone agreed black schools weren't up to par with the white schools. According to the desegregation plans, the quickest way to desegregate the schools under the court-ordered time schedule was to close some of the black inferior schools and disperse the black student population to the surrounding white schools. Shortly before 1970, the decision was made to close Paul Breaux High. That decision sparked a protest in the black community and generated a reevaluation of black education.
There were many individuals who felt that we have alluded to this, that the mere fact that if we were to identify with a particular school or get involved in that school, that the improved educational results would be automatic. So that fizzled out. And there were some of us who thought that over a period of association, becoming identified with a certain particular element, that this would do it. And there were people on the other side who said that, well, we just sit them over here and eventually they come off, they will give up and go back. None of these things actually happen.
It's an emphatic thing that everyone sitting in this room is educated. And we are the products of black school systems. Not desegregated, segregated. And reasons, when you talk about reasons why black schools were closed, they're definitely political. You know, whether it's Paul Breaux or St. Martin High or, you know, I'm just thinking of schools surrounding, and Paul Breaux wasn't no different why it was closed. Now, the reason that created the politics was the fact that it was a black school, and you had certain areas that that school possibly was close to that wasn't going to no school that was formerly all black, and they had political clout. You know, it wasn't no educational decision. You know, and it was strictly a political decision, and it became who was in control politically and what was in their best political interest. Now, like Mr. Foote said, you know, integration, that's a joke.
Production funding of Folks is made possible in part by membership contributions to Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.